Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. And I
Yes.
always have been starting these interviews with kind of a discussion of what it's been like to write since March. And I think what's interesting is I read an interview with you online a few days ago where you talked about how this has been a great time for you creatively. You've been doing a lot. There's a lot of creative output. And that's not what I've heard from most songwriters, that this has been a difficult time. And there was an article in the Washington Post by the theater critic Peter Marks a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about how Shakespeare wrote King Lear during the plague, and how
Yes.
there's, I think, this great anticipation that once this is all over, we're going to get amazing art from people across genres. But most songwriters have told me, there's a limit. I mean, because there's been so much anguish politically, this
Yes.
kind of stuff, it's not as easy to create. So I'm curious what you think about that for you personally, and how has that been?
In my case, I wouldn't say I've written more songs, but I've gotten more proficient. I've gotten more proficient at the tools of songwriting. I've become much better with recording software, much better with components of musical gear. I launched a podcast,
Yeah.
which is doing well. It's on network now. And I've just done I've had some unexpected things come up, like the podcast, which is something I wanted to do for a long time. And there have been intense moments where it's hard to turn off the news, because you just feel like, okay, history is happening right now. But overall, I just think, not having the travel and not having the intense schedule that I usually have as a touring musician has opened up a lot, and it's enabled me to be more creative in different ways than I was before.
Yeah. Do you see, is it difficult for you to create when with a heavy weight on you in general? Again, I think that that's what I've heard from a lot of people, that again, it's just the emotion that
Yes.
when you're that there's a limit to be able to create when you're in a place of darkness.
That's true. That is very true.
Yeah.
I discovered something very valuable about myself recently. I am they talk about creatures of habit. I realized I'm a creature of incentive. I greatly helps by having an incentive. So, for example, I recently did a podcast called Past, Present, Future Live. I think your former guest John Oates has been on there as well, and it's with musicians, but it also includes an exclusive solo performance section. So you basically need to come up with material for a solo performance, and it can be existing material, or you can come up with new material. But that was a situation where, okay, I need to get 3 solo performances together for this appearance, and I had some time to do it. But right there, that I came up with some new music I might not have come up with otherwise. If there is a situation coming up where I need material, that really helps me. By extension, there ends up being benefits to the deadline, because I not only come up with whatever the assignment is, but I tend to have a lot of ideas that I don't use that end up being interesting ideas that I can always come back to at some point.
So that's something someone told me recently. It was Brian Fallon told me that he said, and I think I'm going to quote him directly when he was talking when I did that interview with him and Tracy Guns, and he said, if any songwriter ever tells you that they go back to those ideas on their phone, they're lying. He goes, I have thousands of those ideas and I've never gone back to them. I always say that I will, but I don't, whether they're like riffs or melodies. So do you have all those? They're all stored away somewhere, and how often do you go back to them?
Oh yeah, and I do go back to them, but I understand why he would say that, because there's a lot of, there's more than you can handle. It ends up being this huge scrap heap. Yeah, and occasionally I'll just randomly listen to something and say, oh, what was I doing then? And then I'm surprised. Oh, it's really good. Since Eddie Van Halen passed away, and I was doing some research for my podcast on Eddie Van Halen, and found an interview in his home studio in the early 90s, long before iPhones and even laptops with Pro Tools and Logic. And he was recording everything on reel-to-reel tape.
Yeah.
And he just had shelves and shelves and shelves of reel-to-reel tape, and was telling the interviewer, a journalist from MTV News, that, I don't know what's on there. It's just stuff I recorded one night. And he said, I took down one of the tapes at one point and listened, and it was the piano part from what became Right Now.
Oh, really?
And he had written that around the same time as Jump.
Wow.
So he'd been experimenting with all these keyboard ideas. That was all from like the same time period. And Right Now ended up being like a whole half a decade later, or maybe even close to a decade, a whole other singer, really a whole other era.
I'm fascinated by the rituals of songwriters, time of day, place, things they have to have with them, things like that. How important is that to you in general? Is there any kind of ritual that you like to have in order to get into that zone?
No, it depends. I mean, it happens at different times. I mean, ultimately, I like, if I can have my way, I've had a chance to go outside and get some fresh air, preferably some exercise, take just to feel good personally.
Yeah.
But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes, you get on this great idea and you realize, oh my goodness, you haven't left the house. You need to get cleaned up. It's getting dark. But sometimes the ideas can be so good that they're worth it. So if I'm in the middle of capturing something that I know I might not be able to capture, then I don't care. But ultimately, when I have my preference, it's after I've had like fresh air, some exercise, some coffee. And also, I've gotten into some pretty good zones at night. I've tried not to be, a total night owl, because that can just really mess with your day and you can be really tired. But there is something about late at night, especially now with, notifications and just when the whole world is quieter. Yeah. Like it's really, you can really get on a roll. Like,
and you mentioned walking and exercising. And this is something I've heard from a lot of songwriters, generally the role of movement. I mean, Mark Morton actually told me that he loves to garden. And I've heard songwriters say they get the ideas through gardening. But I've heard, I interviewed Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam about a month ago, and he told me he has this, it's fascinating. It's on my website, but he has this whole theory of how bipedal movement and the rhythm and the cadence just of the limbs moving creates a rhythm and a beat that gets them stimulated to write. So I've heard that a lot about walking, running,
that.
biking, hiking. Yeah. So do you find that ideas come to you whenever you're doing those things?
It has happened. Yeah, it's happened with arrangements. Sometimes if I'm stuck on an idea, and I'll go and I run pretty regularly, or
Yeah.
I'll ride my bike. Suddenly, like, yeah, solutions will open up. Just being away from it for a while, and I think the motion really helps a lot. I think
Yeah.
ideas come in motion that don't show up otherwise. I even read in Bob Dylan's book that he said something to that effect. He just said, he was drawn to trains early on because
Yeah.
of the movement, and he would take the train to New York, and he'd always come up with songs, and he thinks the movement has a lot to do with it. And he said there's some great songwriters in the world, some of the greatest, that aren't writing any songs because they're not moving.
So I think we can kind of, I think we can kind
I
of
got
go.
it. I understood what he was saying.
Yeah, but see that, and I've heard that too, like planes, trains, buses, vans, because as you're moving, you're seeing things, right? Things are passing by, billboards, and things may stimulate you. How has your process changed over the years? I mean, have you become a more efficient? Has your process become more efficient? How is it? What have you learned about your creative process over the years? Are you constantly fine tuning it? I guess, how has it changed in general?
Yeah, I guess I've learned how to tap into it. And I've also, I think I have a lot more confidence than I used to, just having created music that has gotten really nice responses from people I respect. And not just when I'm part of a machine like Testament.
Yeah.
But even like music that I've done, I've overseen the whole process and directed, and I think it took me a long time to get to that point.
Yeah.
I don't know how some people are like these fully fledged songwriters, directors, produce, full of confidence at a young age. Good, bless you.
Right.
But I feel more like I'm somebody. I was good at one thing, which was sort of fast screaming guitar solos.
Right.
But that I also realized, and even being recognized for that at an early age, I realized, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to get a lot more skills because there's a very limited market.
Oh, really? Even back then, you were thinking that?
I was, and I think also I was. By the time I got good at it, I put so many hours into it. Not that I didn't want to keep doing it; I was still into it, but I'd outgrown it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was just discovering music that moved me a lot, that maybe wasn't at a loud volume and wasn't screaming and didn't require this virtuosic technique.
Mm-hmm.
So learning, tapping into these other things, how to create an emotional piece, how to create a mood, how that took years. And I really feel like I didn't start to tap into that until after I'd already had this career.
Yeah.
As the sort of, dynamo of, screaming heavy metal lead guitar.
Right.
But now, in recent years, I've been able to sort of put them both together and have different sides. but it definitely took a long time to get to that point.
But does that actual process change? The actual creative process of sitting down and writing, does that change? How does that differ from when you're writing the jazz stuff?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the beginning process is often the same. It's spontaneous. I guess I could sit down and come up with some music, but I find my favorite ideas, whether they're improvisational instrumental music or hard rock, heavy music, whatever it is, they tend to happen by accident. And I just, get an idea either in my head or on guitar. Often when I'm warming up, I'll just be getting my fingers warm to work on, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I should come back to it. And then, I mean, so as far as like coming back to the ideas that you keep, I do come back to those because, what if I have one of these spontaneous ideas for, say, a riff, and suddenly a couple years goes by and it's Testament has an album due, like the album cycle's done. We have to go into the studio. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me, I've learned to mark those ideas and say, here's stuff to listen to when it's time to, to record or to submit ideas. Cause that's a collaborative process. The same thing. If I have ideas for jazz guitar, I'll make a note of them. This could work here. Or lately I've been coming up with music for my podcast that fits no particular category.
Yeah,
and sometimes it involves keyboards or a MIDI controller, and so same thing. I'll just make a note. Okay, this is music potentially for the podcast. This is music potentially for my trio. This is music, like heavy riffs for Testament, or if it doesn't get used in Testament, maybe another collaborative project. And the same thing. Maybe there's an solo acoustic idea. Okay, I may need to do one of these performances, solo guitar. So let's, I don't force myself to finish the ideas either. I put them away, and then when it's time to which brings us back to incentive.
Yeah. Is it hard though if those ideas have been sitting around for years? Is it hard? Because I'm sure you've got some of them sitting around for that long. Is it hard to kind of to recreate the emotion or the space you were in when you revisit it a long time, a month or a year from now?
Not really. No, it's more like it's often a pleasant surprise because it feels like this fresh idea that somebody else must have come up with, because you can't remember coming up with it. And then that puts you in a better frame of mind for coming up with a connecting part. Because I often, that's another reason why I often have to let an initial part sit for a while, because I need to I need to be away from it. I need to hear it fresh to know where it should go. Not always. There's been some cases where it's, I know exactly where this should go. And maybe I'll even put a whole song together in a short time. But that's tends to happen a bit less often than just one part at a time.
And you talk about letting it sit, and when I was a professor, I would always tell my students, your writing process is always happening. If you think about your writing process as only happening when you're sitting down to write, you're never going to get anywhere. But you got to remember your writing process is happening when you're eating, sleeping, walking, talking, all that stuff. And I think understanding that is just as much a part of the creative process. I think that's important, though.
Well, yeah, because what is writing? But it's sharing thoughts, and you're thinking all the time.
Yeah. All right, a couple more questions. One, is there an ideal emotion when you tend to get your best writing done?
Sometimes it helps.
Yeah.
It definitely does help.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be a random emotion. It can be triggered by something you read, or you get to the end of a film that's particularly moving, or maybe it makes you think about things that are emotional, and suddenly you imagine if you had to do the music for these credits that are rolling out. Oh, what would that sound like? That's actually happened with me a few times.
So do you watch those things? Do you make that a deliberate act sometimes? Read those books, watch those movies to say, let me get some ideas.
I have, but not that often. Usually I just, as part of my regular intake of information, I try to, I read. I'm always reading something, and and sometimes it'll have this effect. And the same with films and TV. Like I don't have time to keep up with all the shows now. I mean, there's just so
it's exhausting.
Yeah. But then there's a few. There's like one I'm watching now called The Queen's Gambit.
Everyone talks about that.
Everyone's probably talking about it. Right?
Yeah.
And so I started watching it, and the music is really good.
Huh.
And there's a character on the show who is a pianist, not a professional pianist, but who plays at a professional level and plays Satie piano pieces, and which I already really like, and a lot of the music is sort of based on that, and the show is very moody. So something like that, I could see that triggering some. So if I suddenly needed to come up with like moody music, I could see putting that on and just using that as a stimulant to come up with moody music.
Okay, so last question. You mentioned this earlier, but reading. I find that songwriters are voracious readers. So what I know you read. So tell me who some of your favorite authors are, books you've read recently, I guess the role that literature in general has played in your life. I know that's a big sweeping question, but songwriters, most of them, like I said, are constantly reading. So who do you like to read?
Living in New York, I've gotten to be friends with a couple writers that are incredible writers. So I'm friends with a literature professor from Bard who also does a literary journal, Bradford Morrow. And he's an incredible writer. I've read every time he has a new book. He actually has one that just came out. That's on my list, which is a sequel to what he's done. And one of his previous book, he was interviewed for a Q&A at the book launch by Diane Ackerman, who's a great writer, and she's become a friend, I'm proud to say. And so it's great when you know people like that. You just
right.
I mean, in some ways it's intimidating because it's like, okay, what am I even doing trying to create anything with words when I'm around these sort of 10th degree black belts.
Right.
And writing. but it's also it raises your standards, and they've turned me on to a lot of good books. Brad's also friends with Joyce Carol Oates.
Oh, awesome!
I've read some of her stuff.
Of course.
Yeah. And I've
her output is
her
insane. I mean, her output, the number of things she's written is staggering.
It's crazy. Like, they're all, the quality is amazing.
Right, but
and she also has time to tweet all the time. Like,
yeah.
She's like superhuman.
But there was a time where, though, people, I think her incorrectly, her reputation suffered because the idea people thought was, you're putting out so much, it can't all be good. So it was this kind of like, if you're doing this much, it's got to be subpar quality. But one of my favorite short stories I've ever read is called "Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been?" by Joyce Carol Oates. I think it was written like in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And it is fantastic. But do you skew towards fiction or nonfiction, or is there a certain genre that you like?
More, I skew towards fiction, but I do read some I try to read a few like current books that are sort of cutting edge. Like I've read some of Noah Yuval Harari's stuff, Sapiens. I needed to read the sequel. That's actually going to be one of my next books. And I go back and forth. Last year, I think this year I've gone sort of back and forth between fiction and nonfiction. I mean, there's so much too. If I have to pick like a favorite, like Philip Roth is one of my favorite writers.
Yeah, he comes up a lot too.
Every time I read him, it makes me want to write.
Yeah, he comes up a lot. I think the big ones that come up as songwriters are Charles Bukowski. Vonnegut comes up a lot. Cormac McCarthy comes up. Raymond Carver, kind of those, the people who really prize word economy. I feel like there's one more, but McCarthy and Vonnegut are the two that come up a lot. Just as far as it makes sense, right? It's that economy of words. The one technique I got this from a songwriter a couple of years ago, and I could never do this, but now I read 3 books at a time, like one fiction, one nonfiction, and maybe something else. And now it does take me longer to read, but he told me that he does that because when he's not reading like the fiction book, he's still thinking about it. So I'll do like a half hour of each a day. And I really like doing that. I'm doing that right now.
That's a good idea. I actually have done that on tour a couple times. I read a book about guitar craftsmanship that someone gave me that was actually really good by a professor at Yale.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You mean on actually making guitars?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because her main area of expertise. She likes music, but her area of expertise is commerce.
Okay.
And business, and I think she's a communications professor.
Yeah.
But she just really likes guitar and started incorporating it into her teachings and ended up doing this book on it, which is really cool. Actually, I have the name of it right here.
Let's see it.
Guitar Makers, the Endurance of Artisanal Values in North America.
Wow, that's a great weighty. Is there a colon in that title? Because that would make it perfectly academic, right?
I don't see a colon, but it is an academic book.
Yeah,
but it's very well done, and it's very it was surprising because I'm around guitar all the time.
I was going to say, what could you possibly learn at this point, right? I mean,
but it really gets into the builders and what drives the builders and the business and the struggle. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so she's a sorry, she's a professor of anthropology and American Studies at Yale.
Okay, cool.
So that was, yeah, that was really interesting. And then,
yeah.
One day I'm going to read the Power Broker, but
Okay.
that's for a vacation. Yeah, the Robert Caro.
So you're a hard copy. You're not a Kindle person.
Actually, I read a lot on. I like small paperbacks, but if I can't get a small paperback, I'll read on iBooks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I enjoy it.
Yeah. I know. I even someone with my background who spent years in the stacks of libraries doing my dissertation, I'm not wedded at all to the printed page. I'm a complete Kindle person.
I read well, for example, like These Truths, the Jill Lepore book.
Yeah.
That's another one I read this year. That was my big project. But that one was actually, I got it as a gift in print. And then when I was on tour, I said, there's no way I want to drag this around. This is ridiculous. I'm going to have to pay extra. It's going to make my luggage overweight.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. It was that big. Okay.
Yeah, but then I got to say, it was better on iBooks. It was better arranged. The photographs were lit up. Yeah. And really came to life. It felt more like a Ken Burns film.
Yeah.
And I realized, this is a much better way to read this book. Yeah. So to me, it really depends on the book.